the PE was definitely much more applicable to the actual job we do, and much more technically detailed into specific areas, which I actually found really helpful. And I've been finding it helpful since taking the exam and taking the class, because a lot of this stuff has been very applicable to the work that I do after having some time in the field and having seen some stuff, and then coming back and actually reviewing all of that, and definitely learning some stuff that I had never even touched.
Josh, how's it going?
Good.
So congrats on passing your P-Power exam in the first attempt.
Thank you.
And you are a returning student of mine, and I was just surprised to find that you actually passed your FE electrical exam back in 2018, and you took my course in September 2018, and October-ish you passed the FE electrical. So after roughly a 4 or 5 year break, you came back and then made it happen with P-Power. So Josh, walk me through your FE exam preparation journey briefly first, and then we'll talk about your P-Power. When did you graduate? What motivated you to get into FE electrical? How you prepared for it? How you passed? And we'll take it from there.
Yeah. So in 2000, I graduated in May of 2018, and I wanted to take the FE while it was still fresh. And in the state that I live in, there's a bit of a gap. After you take the FE, you got to get 4 years of experience before they'll actually allow you to take the exam. So as far as the FE study journey went, I did the on-demand course, and I spent a lot of time doing practice problems and really trying to hit all of it's obviously a lot more general than the PE is. As far as the material you cover, but really repeatedly hitting those practice questions, following the sections that you had laid out in the on-demand, and kind of using a lot of your practice problems, I found helped quite a bit with that.
Right. So the combination of the on-demand plus the practice problems helped you prepare for the FE exam in a fairly short time, in a couple of months, it seems, right? Give or take. And then you went on a long break, because of your state requires you to accumulate that much experience. A lot of states are actually now decoupling the experience requirements. If you're probably aware of Texas, North Carolina, Florida, Michigan, in fact, Florida and California. I think there are about 20 plus odd states that are now allowing you to take the exam right after the FE, which I think is good, because then you can get the exams out of the way.
It's a lot fresher in your mind. Yeah. I think my state actually changed it about a month after my application was accepted.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I see most of the states moving in that direction. So that was your FE journey. So in 2018, you wrapped that up, and then you reached out to me, I believe, in 2022, or I think you just enrolled in the P-Power program. I don't think we had any correspondence in between. You did tell me when you passed the FE, and I congratulated you and whatnot, but then out of the blue in 2022, you enrolled in my program. In fact, you enrolled a week into the program, if I'm not mistaken, right? In September 2022? Yeah. So for the P-Power, you actually decided to go with the on-demand plus the live training, right? Yeah. So you enrolled in September 2022, and first week of December 2022, you basically took the exam and passed the exam in first attempt. So how is P-Power different from FE electrical?
The subject matter you cover is definitely more concentrated on the work that you do in the field that you're in. Definitely a lot more detail, and instead of covering kind of a very broad spectrum of stuff. And so I found that the broad spectrum in the FE definitely covered, it was much more akin to getting an electrical engineering degree. I mean, you cover that variety of topics that you cover in school. So that was a good kind of test of how well I remembered everything that I did in school. Whereas the PE was definitely much more applicable to the actual job we do, and much more technically detailed into specific areas, which I actually found really helpful. And I've been finding it helpful since taking the exam and taking the class, because a lot of this stuff has been very applicable to the work that I do. And it has been, actually, it was the gap is definitely a little bit hard, but it was actually really nice to have that review of all the materials after having some time in the field and having seen some stuff, and then coming back and actually reviewing all of that and getting back into the details, and definitely learning some stuff that I had never even touched
Right.
in my job was very interesting. Actually, I definitely enjoyed it, but it's also been helpful at work and in the things that I do. So
Yeah, it's painful and enjoyable at the same time.
yeah, yeah, no, it's definitely it's a back
So
and forth.
exactly. So I remember, Josh, if you don't mind me sharing this, about 2 to 3 weeks into your studies,
Yeah.
because I conduct surveys after every session, and then there were some topics where I was going in seemingly more detail than what students probably hoped. For example, grounding. I don't exactly remember which topic it was, but there are several such topics, right?
Yeah.
I was just going in too much detail. And when you look at the handbook has a few equations and this and that. And then some of my on-demand content, I'll say that, okay, this is supplementary, but good to know. And even if you don't need to know this for P power, it's good to know as an electrical engineer, understand this difference and that. So you provided me a feedback that, sometimes it's overwhelming and it gets a little bit too much, because there's already so much to study for the exam. And we had a quick chat. In terms of that particular approach, I'm not asking you to validate that, but in the grand scheme of things, even if you think outside the context of the P power exam, it is definitely helpful, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I think I was a little bit overwhelmed in the beginning. It's a lot of material to cover, especially being so far out from having been in school and stuff like that. It was kind of a transition process to really get back into spending hours every day studying. And we definitely got deeper into some of the details, but it ultimately was helpful because I mean, you can't, and kind of like the conversation we had, you can't really just go by the handbook. It's not necessarily entirely prescriptive of what's going to be on there. So they do, having that deeper knowledge of it does help quite a bit when you're taking the exam because you never know exactly what they're going to ask.
Yeah.
And if you've got a broader understanding of the topic, it definitely helps on the exam, but also, there's a lot of value in learning the extra material too, once you're done with the exam. So in retrospect, in hindsight, that stuff ended up being very useful. And towards the end of the course, I ended up enjoying digging a little bit further into that stuff. And after the class was done, I went back and reviewed some of that stuff as well.
Right. And it also gives you a little bit more confidence because I'll be honest, like when I was going through my undergraduate program, I probably took maximum of 2 power systems related courses. One was on motors and the other one was probably in power electronics. So the motors course barely touched upon transmission line design and this and that. But then I did my graduate studies in energy systems and power systems. So that exposed me a little bit more as well. But I'll be honest, I learned the most about power systems in a methodical manner while I was preparing for my P power exam. And then obviously by working in the industry for several years, for 10 plus years, you as a design engineer in consulting environment, field engineering, this and that, you pick up a lot of stuff and then it starts making more sense and you're able to connect the dots. So it's a little bit of a hard work, frustrating experience when you're building that knowledge base. But when things start connecting together, and that's a common feedback that students provide at the end of the course, that somewhere around fault analysis in section 4 of P power, you start seeing symmetrical components coming into play. You start seeing the three-phase analysis really being part and parcel of the whole thing, like the foundation, and it all gels together very nicely at the end, which
Yeah, it
is kind of rewarding and satisfying, right?
does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that definitely that's that kind of hindsight's 2020 as well. I mean, we had to hit a lot of the kind of review. You have to go back through a lot of the basics, which we don't necessarily always cover on a day-to-day basis in our jobs, especially with all the programs and access to different programs that we have now. So once you get through all of that and you start getting into those later sections, it definitely all comes together really nicely where, you can kind of look back and go, oh, okay, that's why this was important.
Exactly. Yeah. And in terms of live training, Josh, how did the live training help you? Like for FE, you did just the on-demand course. I didn't even have live training at that point, actually. But you were making a comment earlier that if you were just doing the on-demand course, it probably would have taken you 5 to 6 months to pass the exam. But with live training, you were able to wrap it up, give or take, in about 3 months. So what was different about live training?
So I mean, a couple of things. The primary difference really was that for me, it helped to kind of have a schedule. It helped to have a timeline, you know. So we're going to cover this material this week, this section the next week, and it kept me on track and also paced, right? So it's not, oh, I'll just do a couple hours a week early on, and then towards the end, I'll, you know, build up and start getting worried about it. It was a very consistent pace for the 3 months, which kind of, for me, worked really well because you actually end up covering all the material. And at the end, you're not just kind of trying to condense everything into cramming for it. So the schedule is a big part, but also being able to ask questions, be on the calls, have conversations about them, kind of in the moment, go through some of the problems. I know I bothered you with a lot of emails throughout the process.
No, I look forward to those emails, like those questions and clarifications, that engagement and discussion in the class. That's what makes it interesting for me as well. It gives me different angles to think through. There are a lot of students who come from other programs to my program. And one of the common feedback is in terms of questions and clarifications, I encourage my students to ask them during the class, even offline via email. You sent a lot of emails, hopefully got a response to every single one of them. But I don't wait until the end of the class to answer any question. Right? Most of the programs, from what I've heard, what they do is that they'll say, you know what, it's going to be one-way conversation for the next 2.5, 3 hours. Okay, once I'm done and dusted, right, with whatever I have to say, then you can ask any questions that you have. At that point in time, 9 out of 10 times, you probably forget what you were asked. And that one instance where you want to ask, you're probably feeling shy and embarrassed at that stage that maybe, you know, I'm the only one who didn't get that, right? But during my live training, you'd say that if not at every single equation, every single step, but definitely at the conclusion of every single concept, I would be encouraging students to, you know, is it clear to everyone? I basically don't move ahead until I get a good feel of, you know, students have understood that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of our classes went long, but we did have, you know, some breaks in there where you know, you get done with the topic and we'd have a pretty decent conversation between different people in the group. You know, a lot of people on the text chat writing in, but really getting a little bit more in detail. And I mean, some of those questions other people asked, you know, helped quite a bit, you know, because when you go through it in the moment and you get a little bit deeper, even though it may take a little bit longer, it definitely helped quite a bit to examine those topics in the moment, like you said, instead of waiting until the end of class, then having to go back to it or you know, maybe having that turn into like, oh, I'll email you afterwards, you know, and give you the answer later. You know, we're all right there in the moment. We can all kind of have that conversation and you can kind of see where other people are going with it as well. I found that helped quite a bit.
Yeah, I personally, during my academic career, I've never been a big fan of group studying because I just find that sometimes a little bit counterproductive, especially if everybody is not on the same page. But hopefully you got the impression and the experience that in the live class, everybody's on the same page. There was little to no wastage of time, very little friction. And in fact, from what you're telling me, you actually benefited from the questions that the students were asking. And I think that is largely because these guys have, like yourself, have passed that fee and they're just one step away from getting the P license. So it's not like high school or, you know, college days where it's a combination of socializing and you know, studying. So it's really focused on getting the job done, and you benefit from the discussions and questions that the people are asking as well. So exam day experience, Josh, what was your exam day experience like?
It's a long test. I know some people like to kind of just like they run through really quickly, they answer whatever they can, then they kind of go back. I found that I was on pace for the most part and a little bit ahead. So I had the time. Time really wasn't an issue on the test. I had plenty of time. I really was able to even stop as I was going and take some time on some of the questions because I knew, oh, I just got ahead on the last 5 questions and I've got this extra time. So while I'm right there, I would stop and maybe spend 10 minutes or a little bit longer on this one problem. And I still had time after, I think I finished the first section like 3 hours and 30 minutes or 40 minutes. I still had time to go back and review some of the questions that I had flagged. And then on the second half, it was the same thing. It's definitely, it's a stressful exam. It's a long day. Some people definitely, their pace is a little bit faster. But I found that I was really able to just kind of go through them. And there wasn't a whole lot of having to go back and review at the end. There was very few problems that I felt like I needed to go back and do that once I got to the end of the section.
So after putting in a lot of effort for the 12 weeks or the 3 months, using the on-demand course, the study guide, the live training program, doing practice exams and whatnot, after you had done all of that heavy lifting, the actual exam day experience was not that uncomfortable. Like the 8 hours, it is 8 hour long exam. It's a long exam.
Yeah.
That's for everyone. But you had a relatively comfortable experience during the exam, essentially getting a feel for every single question and knowing that you have a reasonable handle on most of the problems, right?
Yeah. It's the PE exam, so you expect that there's going to be some questions that are just kind of out of left field. So,
Yeah.
of course, there's a few questions in there where you just kind of, I'm not exactly sure what this is. And maybe come back to those ones. But I would say overall, it was comfortable. And that's kind of what I mean by the pacing. I felt like I was prepared enough that I could, I didn't have to constantly worry about the clock.
Right.
I took a couple minutes extra on a problem, trying to figure out maybe what they were asking.
Right.
That was okay. I was still on pace. So I didn't at any point feel like I was falling way behind or struggling on a bunch of these problems. I couldn't get them, had to come back to them later. I felt comfortable enough with the material that I was able to just kind of go one by one, go through them, answer them as I went, and I didn't feel unconfident with my answers that I was putting down.
That's great. Okay, last two questions for you, Josh. Question number one, what type of sacrifices you had to make during your exam preparation? What are things that you had to give up? Everyone has limited time, right? And we're already very busy, and then throw in this huge project in between the busy lives. Something has to give way, right?
Definitely maybe taking some trips to go see family, or lost most of my weekends during the process. My initial plan was like, hey, I'm going to get done work and I'm going to study for 4 hours a day, but that doesn't always work out in reality. So I did end up studying a lot of weekends, mostly for myself, just to put in the extra time. Whereas I'd originally planned like, oh, hey, I'm just going to do the class, take the weekends off. So I would say weekends was a bit of a sacrifice, but it was all worth it in the end. And it wasn't like it ate up 100% of my time. I was still able to do some relaxing. Beyond that, I mean, it was really just that free time, maybe spending a little bit more time with the family, on occasion, maybe some sleep as I try to dig into stuff, and stay on schedule, right? Well worth it in the end. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hours. I think I was somewhere in 300 to 350 hours of studying when it was all said and done, but well worth it.
Yeah, for sure. And the last question is, what would be advice for students who are thinking about taking PE Power, to be quite blunt, are procrastinating, a little bit hesitant in making that commitment and diving in all in with their PE Power exam preparation?
Well, I recommend your course. You didn't ask me to say that. Make a plan. For me, having the course definitely helped me stay on schedule, but it's very important to pace yourself. You don't want to end up at the end trying to cram, kind of rushing up on the test day, maybe having to reschedule, stuff like that. Make a plan, stick to it, stay consistent, put in the time that you need to. Maybe plan on putting a little more time in than maybe you need to, just to cover yourself, because there's going to be sections that you get to that are hard. There may be stuff that you've never touched before, or if you're like me and you worked for a number of years, maybe stuff that you just haven't touched since college, or you just don't see a lot during your day-to-day responsibilities. So making a plan, sticking to it. It's an up and down process. You go through phases where you're like, oh man, this is going to be terrible. There's no way I'm going to get through this. And then, I feel great about this section, I've got it down, expect an ebb and flow, stick with it though. It's worth it.
It's a test of your faith.
It
goes up and down.
It's a test on your perseverance and your as well. But stick with it. It's well worth it. It's well worth taking the time. I've already seen some of the benefits of it.
Yeah, congratulations on all of that. And thanks a lot for wonderful advice, Josh. And just to close it off, I mean, it's a lot of hard work. And the one thing that you mentioned several times, I'm gonna finish it off on that, is that it's well worth it, right?
Absolutely.
And it will open tons and tons of opportunity for you. You're right now in the renewable field that itself is at the cutting edge, and once you have your credentials, you get that additional credibility. It's a privilege to be a PE, and then a well-earned privilege. It doesn't come easy. You have to put in a lot of time and effort, demonstrate your competence, check all of those boxes, and then you basically get this. So once again, many congratulations on all the hard work and the result that you achieve, and it's only going to get better.
Thank you. Thank you for everything throughout the entire process. It was definitely, I liked the course, and I walked out obviously passing the exam, but also feeling a lot more confident in a lot of sections that I definitely wasn't confident in going into the course and studying for this stuff. So it's helped build my confidence a little bit more as an engineer. I learned a lot more than I expected to. And again, just end on the, well worth it.